Hello and welcome back to the Alchemical Arts. Today I thought I'd bring you into some of the background work that I do when I have to prepare chemicals for making the pigments. So what I'm starting to do today, as a result of my lovely Patreon people, I was able to acquire some antimony trioxide here, which will allow me to start down the road of making some antimony based pigments. So Naples yellow, antimony vermilion, and a few other little examples. Antimony is another one of those great classical alchemical metals and has quite a high regard or high esteem throughout much of alchemy's history. What I'm going to be making today is a thing called Tartar Emetic. An emetic is essentially something to induce vomiting. There are some great medieval and Renaissance images to do with antimony and vomiting and purging. It's all a lot of fun stuff. It was used in medicine for a while, the Tartar Emetic, but it's very toxic and not something you really want to be drinking in order to help you throw up. But for today's purpose, this is what we will be doing. So I have here in the beaker here, I have 10 grams of potassium tartrate or potassium hydrogen tartrate, which you could find at your local supermarket, most likely in the baking section under cream of tartar. And then over here we have 10 grams of antimony trioxide as well, and 90 mils of water. So all we're going to do is place them in the round bottom flask here. And then into there we will add our 90 mils of water. Get our glass stir rod and give things a bit of a stir. And last but not least, because we're going to be refluxing this, I've got just a few chunks of broken safety glass to add in here as boiling chips. These boiling chips are super necessary when refluxing things, because if you don't, what often tends to happen is there isn't a site for bubbling to occur, and the boil will sit, the surface tension at the top of the water will hold the boiling there, and then at some point it'll erupt and it'll send stuff up through the flask. So yeah, this is the apparatus that I'll be using today. At the bottom we've got my heating mantle, got a round bottom flask, and we got a condenser on top. And so we're going to reflux this for about 15 minutes, and then we will filter it. So I've got everything going. As you can tell, it's noisy because the pump's running, so it's pumping water through the condenser. We've got this heating up here. The aim will be just to bring it to a boil and boil it for about 15 minutes, then filter it while it's hot, and then wait for it to recrystallize. So we're getting quite a vigorous boil going on in there, as you can see. And there's definitely stuff refluxing up the condenser. Up here. But, yeah, quite a decent little boil. I've just turned it down a bit because it definitely was getting too hot. But we'll let that just keep going for a bit longer. So here I have Elemina flask with the glass funnel that I've pre-warmed. and a little bit of cotton wool in there to filter out any of the material. And so I've just got a little bit of cloth around to help me holding it because it's kind of hot. So I think the initial filtration, unfortunately, I think some particulate matter went through, so what we'll do is we'll filter it again into this beaker. Again, there's still cloudiness, so I think what I'm going to do is probably need to use filter paper. You can see the little crystals forming and sparkling as they sort of just drop out of solution there as it cools down. It's quite pretty to watch. They're just sort of swirling around in there. I'm pretty into the fact that this actually worked. So after removing from the freezer, there are tons of little shiny, sparkly, diamond-like crystals. So what I'm going to do is just tip off this liquid carefully. And there we have the remainder. So there's still tons of crystals in there. And all I'm going to do is probably just dry this out as is. We'll leave it in the sun for a bit and then collect our product. So here we have the still wet crystals Tartar Emetic, which is potassium antimony tartrate. And I found this process really quite fascinating for a lot of different reasons, but to end up with these really kind of bright, shiny, glistening little crystals, they're really cool. They're really fascinating. And as they were sort of flowing around in the solution, which I still have the remainder of the solution here, which is still crystallizing more out, in the sunlight there was like this sort of opalescent sort of rainbow sparkle that you get with like crystals with the refraction of light and so forth, that being an ancient alchemical process, I really enjoyed the fact that there was this sort of rainbow sparkle happening in there, because it makes me think of in alchemy there's this operation called the Cauda Pavonis, which means like the coming of the peacock's tail. So for me to see this sort of explosion of like glistening color and all of from all these little points of light was very reminiscent of that idea of this sort of unfolding of the peacock's tail and all the little glistening colors. Now, this particular salt, that I've made here, I'm going to now work it into a pigment called Antimony Vermilion, which we will cover in the next video.